The life of Richard Whitmore was like a fortress built of glass and steel, solid, luxurious, and cold. His penthouse sat on the 57th floor of the tower that bore his own name, overlooking the glowing lights of Manhattan. At 54, Richard was the embodiment of the American definition of success. His black hair had silvered at the temples, and his once razor-sharp blue eyes now carried heavy shadows, the weight of sleepless nights and regrets that could never be erased. His name was carved on skyscrapers, on Forbes covers. The press called him the real estate king of the Northeast. But in that lavish apartment, the only thing Richard's heart could hear was the echoing emptiness of his own life. Isabel Marie Whitmore. She died 10 years ago on a rainy October night. The car lost control and plunged straight into the Hudson River. Isabel was only 24. Richard remembered every detail of that night. He had been in Tokyo in a meeting for a $200 million acquisition. The phone rang at 2:00 a.m. His assistant's trembling voice came through the line. The flight back took 14 hours. By the time he reached the hospital, it was already too late. A cold room, a white sheet covering a small body. Richard pulled the sheet back with trembling hands. Isabel's face looked peaceful, as if asleep, but her skin was frozen to the touch. "My daughter," his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." But apologies made too late are just ghosts. When Isabel died, a part of Richard's soul went with her. For the entire 24 short years of her life, Richard had been the kind of father who was always absent. Not because he didn't love his daughter, he did deeply in his own way, but that love was always overshadowed by work, by meetings, by deals he kept convincing himself were impossible to skip. He still remembered Isabel's 6th birthday. She had begged him to stay home for her party with friends. But that day, a client flew in from Dubai. Richard chose the meeting. When he returned home at 11 p.m., Isabel had fallen asleep on the sofa, still wearing her pink princess dress. The birthday cake sat untouched on the table, its 6 candles long extinguished. His wife, Catherine, looked at him with cold eyes. "She waited for you until 9, then cried for 2 hours. Richard knelt beside his sleeping daughter, gently brushing her smooth hair. "I'll make it up to you, sweetheart. I promise." But he never fulfilled that promise. There was always another deal, another flight, another reason to be gone. By the time Isabel turned 12, Catherine filed for divorce. "I can't live with a man married to his work," she said. After that, Isabel saw her father less and less. By 18, she barely spoke to him. Richard had another child, Marcus, 6 years older than Isabel. If his relationship with Isabel had grown cold, then his relationship with Marcus was nearly shattered. Marcus once tried to follow in his father's footsteps, studied business, worked at Whitmore Enterprises for 3 years, but he couldn't take it anymore. "All you care about is profit," Marcus had shouted during their final argument 4 years ago. "You don't care about people. You don't care about me. You weren't even there when Isabel needed you the most. You don't understand the pressure of running an empire," Richard fired back, his voice hoarse with anger and pain. "No, you don't understand," Marcus said, tears in his eyes. "You traded your family for skyscrapers, and what do you have now? 2 children who hate you." The words sliced straight into his heart. Marcus walked out that day. Since then, only a few short holiday emails, no calls, no family dinners, just silence. Every year on October 14th, the day Isabel died, Richard followed a private ritual. He canceled all meetings, turned off his phone, and drove 2 hours to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. The cemetery, old and quiet, sprawling beneath oak trees, looked more like a park than a burial ground. Isabel's grave was on a small hill under an ancient oak. Richard chose it because Isabel loved trees. As a child, she used to climb the tall tree in their yard and sit there reading for hours. Her headstone was simple, made of gray granite, engraved with Isabel Marie Whitmore, 1989-2013, beloved daughter, she painted the world with her dreams. Richard refused any grand memorials. Isabel hated extravagance. She loved simplicity and sincerity, the very qualities Richard had forgotten while she was alive. This was the 10th year. a round milestone, heavier than all the others. That morning, Richard woke before dawn. From 3 a.m. he lay staring at the ceiling as memories of Isabel drifted through his mind like old film reels. Isabel at 3, laughing in his arms. Isabel at 10, proudly showing him her painting. And Isabel at 18, looking at him with sad eyes. At 6th day, Richard put on a simple black suit, the old one Isabel once said she liked, because you look more like a normal dad when you wear it. He carried a single red rose, her favorite. Richard had no idea that today's visit would rewrite the rest of his life, because on the other side of the hill, beneath that ancient oak tree, stood a man, a janitor with calloused hands, silently visiting Isabel's grave. Beside him, a small child was carefully placing tiny stones on the headstone. Who were they? And why were they crying at his daughter's grave? That morning, Richard didn't let the driver take the wheel. He wanted to be alone. The black Mercedes S-Class quietly exited the underground garage of Whitmore Tower, rolling along FDR Drive where the East River reflected the first light of dawn. The city was waking up. Joggers moved along the riverfront, small coffee shops lifted their shutters, and the smell of toasted bread drifted in the breeze. Life went on. Even though inside Richard, time seemed to freeze whenever he thought of Isabel. As the car moved across the Brooklyn Bridge, the sun rose behind Manhattan's skyline, painting the sky in vibrant streaks of orange and pink. Isabel had loved mornings like this. She once said, "Every sunrise is a painting the universe makes by hand, Dad, and no two are ever the same." The memory tightened something in his chest. Richard drove slowly through the old streets of Brooklyn, rows of brownstones, artsy cafes, vintage shops emitting a nostalgic charm. 10 years had passed and the neighborhood had changed in many ways, but Greenwood Cemetery remained the same, quiet, ancient, seemingly untouched by time. When he parked and stepped out of the car, Richard felt his heartbeat accelerate in an unfamiliar, uneasy rhythm. 10 years. Yet the pain remained as raw as it had been on that fateful morning. Some wounds, perhaps, never heal. Some losses, time can only circle around, never truly cross. Holding the red rose, he walked up the stone path that led to the hill where Isabel rested. A gentle wind blew, trembling the leaves of the old oak tree. Then, in the stillness of the place, Richard heard a sound. At first he thought he imagined it, a trick of memory. But no, it was unmistakably crying, real, broken sobs tearing through the quiet like a jagged rip. Richard quickened his steps, heart pounding, and when he rounded a cluster of red maples, the sight before him made him stop. In front of Isabel's grave, a man was kneeling, his shoulders shaking, his face buried in his hands as he cried, the kind of cry that sounded like it came from the deepest part of someone's soul. Next to him, a girl, about 9 years old, sat on the ground, carefully arranging small stones into a little pyramid. Her purple jacket was worn, her brown curly hair tied into 2 pigtails, and her sneakers looked slightly too big. Hand-me-downs from someone else. Richard froze. This was the most sacred place he had, a private sanctuary meant only for him and Isabel. Who were these people? And why were they here, right in front of his daughter's grave? The man still hadn't realized someone was behind him. He kept crying, the kind of stifled, restrained sobs that carried the weight of 10 years of regret. But the little girl lifted her head. Her eyes met Richard's, and in that instant, time stopped. Those eyes. Richard recognized them immediately. They were identical to Isabel's, deep blue, with tiny golden flecks around the iris and a slight upward curve at the outer corners, just like when she smiled. His heart seemed to stop. He stared at the child, a wave of confusion and fear washing through him. "Excuse me," Richard said, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is my daughter's grave. Who are you?" The man startled and turned around, his eyes red. He looked to be in his 30s, with messy brown hair and a pale face. "Oh God, I'm sorry. My name is Darius Holt, and this is Amara." "Why are you here? Why are you crying at my daughter's grave?" Darius looked down at the grave, then back up. I came to visit my sister Elena. Her grave is over there. But I also visit Isabel because she mattered so much to someone I loved very dearly. And because... He hesitated, glancing at Amara. Because what? Richard asked, his heart beating faster. Darius took a breath. Because Amara is Isabel's daughter. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Richard staggered, gripping the oak tree for balance. The rose slipped from his hand onto the blanket of fallen leaves, a deep red against the golds and browns of autumn. What? His voice dropped to a whisper. What? What did you just say? Amara is Isabel's child, Darius repeated, firmer this time, but still full of emotion. And Adrian Coles, my best friend. Richard stared at the girl. Amara gazed back, those deep, clear blue eyes, Isabel's eyes, studying him. She didn't understand the weight of what had just been said. Mister, Amara said softly, her voice like a tiny bell. Are you sad? My dad says people come here when they're sad. Richard's throat tightened painfully. He knelt down so he was eye level with the child. Up close, he saw even more, the slightly upturned nose, the tiny frown of concentration, the soft curl at the ends of her hair. All of it was Isabel. Hello, he said, voice trembling. You're Amara, right? She nodded. Yes, I'm 9. I'm building pretty stones for Mommy. She pointed to the small pyramid of pebbles she had balanced so carefully. Your mother, Richard repeated, his throat closing. Darius stepped forward and placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. Amara, sweetheart, go over there and find a few more stones, okay? He gestured to a path farther away. Daddy needs to talk to this man for a minute. Amara looked between them, then nodded. Okay, but you have to help me build it later. I promise, my love. The girl skipped away, her 2 big sneakers clapping against the stone path. Richard watched her go, his heart thundering like a drum. When Amara was far enough, Richard turned back. Explain, he said, trying to stay calm, though his voice still shook. Everything, right now. Darius sat down on the grass, leaning against a nearby headstone. His eyes were still swollen. Adrian Cole was my best friend from high school, he began. He met Isabel in an art class at the Brooklyn Community Center about 11 years ago. Richard stood still, trying to piece things together. Isabel took art classes. He didn't know. He had never asked what she liked, what she did. They fell in love, Darius continued, fast and deeply. Adrian told me Isabel was the woman he wanted forever. They planned a future, a little house upstate, a couple of kids, a dog, a simple life. His voice faltered. He had to swallow hard. Richard felt his own legs weaken and slowly lowered himself onto the cold ground, not caring about the expensive suit. Why didn't I know? He asked faintly. Why didn't Isabel tell me? Darius looked at him, and in his eyes was a blend of sympathy and reproach. Because she was scared. Scared you wouldn't approve. Adrian wasn't wealthy. He was a carpenter, lived in Bed-Stuy. Isabel said her father always had big plans for her. You wanted her to marry someone from your world, someone who could expand the Whitmore empire? No, Richard protested. But even he heard the hollowness in his voice. He had had expectations. He had tried to shape her path without asking what she wanted. And there was one more reason, Darius said quietly. She said you were never there. She tried reaching out many times, but you were always busy. Meetings, deals, business trips. Eventually, she stopped trying. Each word was another stone thrown at his chest, and he had no defense. He had been absent. He had buried himself in work. He had missed his daughter's entire life. Tell me about them, Richard said, voice breaking. About Adrian and Isabel, I need to know. Darius looked toward Amara, who was gathering stones in the distance. A sad smile tugged at his lips. They were beautiful together, he said. Adrian made Isabel laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in the chest. They spent hours in his wood shop, Adrian carving and sanding, Isabel sketching, soft music playing, talking about everything. Richard pictured that, his daughter, peaceful, happy, living a life he had never imagined for her. "Did he propose?" Richard asked. "He did," Darius nodded. "One summer evening on the Brooklyn Bridge. No flashy diamond, just a silver ring Adrian made himself with a blue stone. Isabel's favorite color." She said yes immediately. Tears streamed down Richard's face. He didn't wipe them. His daughter had been engaged. She had mapped out a life, and he had known nothing. "And Amara," he whispered. "Isabel got pregnant and gave birth 2 months before the accident," Darius said. "They were over the moon. They found a bigger apartment. Adrian took extra shifts. Isabel painted murals for the baby's room. Animals, forests, starry skies." He stopped, wiping his eyes. "And then that night happened." Richard knew the broad strokes. The car lost control in the rain, broke through the railing. But now he wanted the full truth. "Elena, my sister, was driving," Darius said, his voice heavy. "She and Isabel had been close since high school. That night they went to an art exhibit in Manhattan. Adrian wanted to go but had the flu and told Isabel to stay home. She still wanted to support her friend on her first show." He inhaled deeply. "Elena had 1 glass of wine, just one. But maybe she was tired and the roads were slick. On the way back over the bridge, she lost control. The car slid, hit the railing, and then..." He stopped. There was no need to finish. Richard already knew the rest. "How did Adrian survive?" Richard asked softly. "He didn't," Darius said bitterly. "Not really. His body kept going, but his soul died with Isabel that night." Richard's chest tightened. "In the first weeks, Adrian couldn't get out of bed," Darius continued. "I stayed with him, made sure he ate, made sure he didn't do something reckless. He cried nonstop, kept blaming himself. If only I'd been there. If only I'd stopped her. It's my fault." Then, for Amara's sake, he forced himself to keep living. "Adrian was the most devoted father I've ever seen," Darius said. "He learned how to bottle feed, change diapers, rock her to sleep. He turned his woodshop into a tiny, warm home. He worked nights after Amara fell asleep so he could spend the daytime with her." Richard listened, heart aching. Adrian, a man he had never met, had done everything he, Richard, had failed to do for his own children. Adrian had been present. He had loved. He had sacrificed. "Adrian raised Amara for 3 years," Darius said, voice weighted. 3 beautiful, difficult years. He loved her with everything he had. But the grief of losing Isabel never left him. It was always there, like a shadow. Then one day, when Amara had just turned 3, Adrian had an accident at a construction site. A wooden beam fell from above and struck his head. He died instantly. Richard closed his eyes, pain flooding through him. "I was Adrian's designated guardian," Darius said. "I took Amara in, and I tried contacting you. 3 calls to your office after Adrian died. 3 messages. You never called back." Richard shuddered. "I didn't know. God, I truly didn't know." Darius pulled an old envelope from his pocket. "Adrian kept this letter. Isabel wrote it to a friend but never got to send it." Richard opened it with trembling fingers. The delicate handwriting was unmistakably Isabel's. "Dear Sarah, I'm pregnant. Adrian and I are having a baby. I'm both happy and terrified. I haven't told my dad. He won't accept Adrian, not because Adrian isn't good, but because he's not the type of man my dad wants for me. But Sarah, Adrian is everything I need. We've decided that after the baby is born, we'll leave New York, Vermont or Maine, somewhere quiet. I'll paint, Adrian will work with wood, and we'll be happy. I know it. It means being far from family. Part of me is sad. I used to think one day my dad would change, but I can't wait forever. If my dad asks, tell him I'm okay, I'm happy, and maybe one day when the baby is older, I'll give him a chance to be a grandfather. Everyone deserves a second chance, right? Love, Isabel." By the time he finished, tears blurred the words. His daughter had been happy. She had plans, dreams. She had even intended to give him a second chance, but that chance had never come. Before Richard could respond, Amara ran back, her hands full of stones. "Daddy, look!" Her eyes sparkled. "I found a pink one. They're super rare." Darius smiled despite the redness of his eyes. Beautiful, sweetheart. Amara turned to Richard, studying him curiously. Who are you? She asked, tilting her head. Richard opened his mouth, but the words stuck in his throat. How could he tell this child, his own flesh and blood, who he was? Darius placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Honey, this is Mr. Richard. He's your grandfather. Amara stared, her brows knitting. Grandfather, she repeated, tasting the word. Then, slowly, understanding dawned. So, he's Mommy's dad? Yes, Darius said softly. Amara went quiet, looking down at the stones in her hands. Then she lifted her eyes to Richard. Did my mommy ever talk about you? The question cut deep, sharp as a blade. Richard didn't know how to answer. What had Isabel told Adrian about him? That he was absent? That he had failed her? Then he remembered the last line of the letter. Everyone deserves a second chance. Your mom loved me, he finally said, voice shaking. And I loved her very much. I just wasn't very good at showing it. Amara considered this, then nodded. That's okay. My dad says grown-ups sometimes aren't good at saying what they feel. A broken smile touched Richard's lips, tears still falling. Your dad was a very wise man. I know, Amara replied seriously. Then she held up the pink stone. Do you want to help me build? Richard looked at the stone, then at the small face before him. Isabel's eyes looking back at him with a simple trust he didn't deserve, yet longed for desperately. I'd love to, he said, reaching out. Amara placed the stone in his palm. The light touch, warm and real, felt like a promise. In the days after the encounter at the cemetery, Richard couldn't stop thinking about Amara. The little girl's eyes slipped into both his dreams and his waking hours. Richard hired a private investigator to verify Darius Holt's story. The report came back 3 days later and confirmed every word. Darius Holt, 30 years old, worked at Greenwood Cemetery for 7 years, lived with Amara in a one-bedroom apartment in Sunset Park. Annual income of about $38,000, no debt except a small student loan. Neighbors called him a devoted father. A week after their first meeting, Richard went back to Greenwood, looking for Darius. He found him trimming shrubs around moss-covered headstones. Mr. Whitmore, Darius said in surprise, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Call me Richard. I'd like to talk if you have a moment. They sat beneath a large maple tree. I had your story verified, Richard said. Not because I didn't believe you, but because I needed certainty. Darius nodded. I understand. Amara really is my granddaughter, and I've missed the first 10 years of her life. You can still be present in her future, if you want to be, Darius said gently. I do, Richard answered urgently, but I don't know where to start. The first step is to admit that, Darius said. You just did. Step 2, decide you'll do things differently. Step 3, keep showing up. I want to see Amara again, properly. Would you agree to that? Darius considered this. I'll talk to Amara. If she wants to meet, we'll arrange it. On her terms. Thank you, Richard exhaled. 3 days later, Darius called. Amara wants to meet. Prospect Park, Saturday, 10 a.m. I'll be there, Richard said. On Saturday morning, Richard chose jeans and a sweater and drove himself to Brooklyn. Prospect Park blazed with autumn color. He found Darius and Amara near the playground. Amara wore an orange jacket swinging high, face glowing. Hi, Amara, Richard said, kneeling. Do you remember me? Yes, you're my grandpa. Why do you want to spend time with me? She asked. Because I loved your mom very much, and you're a part of her, and a part of me. Did my mom miss you? I believe she did, Richard answered. She loved me, even though sometimes I made her sad. And I think she would want us to know each other. Amara nodded. Will you push the swing for me? I'd love to. They spent the afternoon together, swings, hot chocolate, collecting leaves. As they prepared to leave, Richard asked if they'd visit his home to see Isabel's paintings. Amara nodded eagerly. I want to see my mom's paintings, Darius agreed cautiously. But Amara isn't used to your lifestyle. I don't want her overwhelmed. I understand, I'll be careful." Amara hugged Richard before leaving. "Bye, Grandpa Richard." The words filled his heart with both joy and sorrow. The following Saturday, Darius and Amara arrived at Richard's penthouse. When the elevator doors opened, Amara's eyes widened. "Whoa, this place is bigger than my whole building." Richard led them to his study, where Isabel's paintings hung. One watercolor showed a lake at sunset. "Your mom painted this when she was 19. She dreamed of living near a lake like that." A pencil sketch showed a sleeping baby. In the margin, "For my child one day." "Is that me?" Amara whispered. "I believe it is. Your mom dreamed about you." Richard brought out a box of keepsakes, photos, letters, a tiny lion pendant. "These belong to your mom. I want you to have them." Darius helped Amara put on the pendant. She touched it, smiling softly. While Amara examined the items, Darius walked to the window. Richard joined him. "I never thought I'd stand in a place like this," Darius said. "Feels like another world." "It is," Richard admitted, "but it's empty if there's no one to share it with." "So why change now?" "Because meeting Amara showed me what I've really lost, the chance to have a real family." Darius looked at him. "It won't be easy. Trust takes time." "I just want to be present," Richard said. "Fine, but on my terms. We take it slow." "Agreed." From that day on, Richard visited Brooklyn every weekend. He brought thoughtful gifts, an art set, a book about stars, a warm scarf. He listened when Amara talked about school and dreams. He built Lego towers and watched her favorite movies. One afternoon, Amara asked, "Why didn't you come to my mom when she was still alive?" Richard was silent. "I was wrong. I thought work was more important than family. By the time I realized the truth, your mom was gone." "Were you sad?" "Every day, but being with you makes me feel closer to her." Amara climbed onto the sofa and leaned her head on his shoulder. "You can be sad, but you're not alone, because now you have me." The words unlocked something inside Richard. He held the girl close and let the tears fall. As Richard's bond with Amara deepened, he realized he could no longer avoid Marcus. 4 years of silence, the gap between father and son had become a canyon. One evening, Richard picked up the phone, hand shaking. "Marcus, it's Dad." A long pause. "I know, your name shows up. Can you talk? About family, about Isabel, and about your niece." They met the next morning at a quiet cafe. Marcus arrived, 36 now, more grounded, simple sweater and jeans. Richard told him everything: the cemetery, Darius, Amara, that Isabel had a daughter the family never knew about. Marcus listened, nearly expressionless. When Richard finished, he stayed silent. "Isabel had a little girl," he finally said, voice trembling. "How long have you known?" 2 months. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I needed time." "You always do that," Marcus said, anger simmering. "Prioritize work, shut down your feelings, act like a CEO instead of a father." "You're right," Richard said. "I failed you and Isabel. Now Isabel's gone, my son is distant, and I have one last chance with Amara. I can't lose that." Marcus stared at his coffee. "The hardest part of being your son wasn't the money. It was that you weren't there, not for my games, my recitals. The day I graduated top of my class, you were in Singapore." "I sent a gift," Richard said weakly. "A Rolex. I was 18. I didn't need a watch. I needed a father." Marcus paused. "Isabel called me a few months before she died. She was crying. She'd met someone, was in love, but was afraid to tell you. I told her to live her life. Then she died. I never knew if she got to be happy." Tears welled in Richard's eyes. She did. She loved Adrian. They were going to get married, have a family. "At least she had that," Marcus whispered. "Do you want to meet Amara?" Richard asked softly. "Does she know about me?" "She knows she has an uncle. She was excited." Marcus sighed. "I'm not promising forgiveness, not yet. But I want to meet her. She's family." They arranged to meet at the Brooklyn Children's Museum. When Marcus arrived, Amara was drawing a dinosaur. "Amara," Richard called gently, "there's someone who wants to meet you. This is Uncle Marcus." Amara's eyes lit up. "You're the one who designs buildings." Marcus crouched down. "That's right, and you must be Amara." "Grandpa Richard says you're really smart." "I'm trying," Marcus smiled. "Do you like drawing?" "I love it. My mom drew too." A flicker of emotion crossed Marcus's face. "Your Aunt Isabel was amazing. She used to draw dragons and castles just for me." "Really? I can draw those? Want to see?" "I'd love to." After the museum, they stopped for pizza. Amara sat between the two men, chatting nonstop. When it was time to say goodbye, Amara hugged Marcus. "Will you come again?" "Yes," Marcus said, looking at Richard. "I'll come again." After Darius walked Amara ahead, Marcus stayed back with Richard. "She's special," Marcus said. "Yeah," Richard nodded. "You're really trying with her. I can see that." "All I want is not to repeat my mistakes." "That doesn't erase the past," Marcus said slowly, "but it's a start." "That's all I'm hoping for." Marcus turned to go, then stopped. "Dad, I'm not promising things will be okay right away, but I want to try." "Thank you," Richard whispered. October came again, 11 years since Isabel's passing. This year, Richard didn't go to Greenwood alone. The whole family came: Richard, Marcus, Darius, and Amara. They walked together to honor Isabel. Each brought a gift: Richard a red rose, Marcus a handwritten letter, Darius a photo of Isabel and Adrian, Amara a drawing of their family with Isabel watching from above. "Mom," Amara said softly, "I don't remember you, but I hear beautiful stories. I know you love me because I feel it every day." After the memorial, Richard gathered everyone. "I bought a place for us, a lake house upstate, a home where family can gather, where Amara can grow up around nature, where we can make new memories." They drove to the house together. Amara ran to the deck, eyes wide. "It looks just like the picture my mom drew." "Exactly," Richard smiled. "That was the idea." Inside was a bedroom for Amara, painted soft lavender, a room for Darius, rooms for Marcus, and a sunlit studio where Amara could draw. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered. "Isabel would have loved it." "That's what I wanted," Richard replied, "to keep her dream alive." They stayed the weekend. Richard taught Amara to fish. They made dinner together, chaotic, loud, full of laughter. At the table, Richard lifted his glass. "To Isabel." "To Isabel," they echoed. When night fell, Richard sat alone on the dock. Darius appeared with tea. "Amara's happy," Darius said. "She has a family now. You made that happen." "Not just me. All of us. The day we met, I thought you were just another arrogant billionaire, but you surprised me. You learned to listen. You changed. I had to, for Amara, for Marcus, for Isabel." "It's never too late," Darius said quietly. "She's still watching, and she's proud of you." Richard looked up at the stars, a tear slipping down, not from grief, but from forgiveness finally earned. "Thank you, Isabel," he whispered, "for teaching me how to love again." As the stars blazed above, Richard Whitmore finally understood. It's never too late to change, never too late to love, never too late to come home. Family isn't defined by perfection, but by choosing love even when it hurts. Those we love never truly disappear. They live in our memories, in the warmth that travels through generations. Isabel once dreamed of a lake house filled with laughter. She didn't live to see it. But her dream came true, in Amara and Richard finding his way home in their family, imperfect but whole.